I was sitting in my office a few years ago, surrounded by everything I had spent a decade building. The paycheck was consistent, the colleagues were like family, and the future looked like a perfectly paved, well-lit road. By every standard of modern success, I had made it. But as I sat there, I felt this strange, heavy stillness. Not the kind that comes from peace, but the kind that settles deep underwater, where the pressure is immense, but everything is silent. I realized in that moment that I was about to walk away from all of it. When I told a friend, they asked if I was determined to succeed in whatever came next. I struggled to answer because determination sounded too loud, too aggressive, like I was trying to punch my way through a wall. What I was feeling was much quieter. It wasn't a flame burning upward, it was a weight solidifying within me. In Japan, there is a word for this specific state of mind: Kakugo. It's often translated as resolve, but that doesn't quite capture the bone-deep sincerity of the term. To truly understand Kakugo, you have to look past the modern boardrooms and into the shadow of the samurai. We often view the ritual of seppuku as an act of brutality or a worship of pain, but in the Japanese mentality, it was something else entirely. It was the ultimate expression of inner alignment, the refusal to make an excuse or abandon a path once it was chosen. Most of us think making a decision is about the win at the end. We choose the path that looks the most promising. But Kakugo is different. It isn't about seizing the future. It's about a private contract you make with yourself to accept every single consequence that follows: the disappointment, the inevitable pain, and the unexpected twists. It is the stillness that comes not from the courage to fight, but from the refusal to run. It makes you wonder, what happens to your life the moment you stop looking for an exit strategy? When you stand before a dim mountain trail and instead of weighing the pros and cons, you simply take a breath and say, "I will walk this way." That opening narrative, I think, really just sets the stage perfectly because it introduces this key tension at the heart of our deep dive today.
It really does.
We've been given this incredibly powerful sort of layered concept, Kakugo, and our mission is to unpack it. We're going to trace its philosophical roots in the samurai code, explore how states have appropriated that sense of total sacrifice for some pretty cynical political ends.
And bring it right back to today, to see how that profound, quiet resolve might actually show up in a high-pressure modern life, like the one you just described.
Right.
And what you highlighted in your story is, I think, precisely the core distinction we need to make. It's the difference between that Western idea of proactive determination and Kakugo.
Determination sounds aggressive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's all about external metrics, about fighting to control all the variables and, dictate the outcome.
Exactly. It's an external fight. Kakugo, on the other hand, is a completely internal state. It's more of a serene preparedness, a willingness to accept the worst-case scenario before you even take the first step.
So it's not about winning, it's about accepting.
It's a form of radical acceptance, yes. It prioritizes that inner sincerity, that bone-deep commitment you mentioned, over just chasing some external success. It's almost like a form of preemptive psychological resilience.
So we're moving from the idea of I will fight to win to something more like I accept the full cost of walking this path, regardless of whether I win or not.
Precisely. And in a society where we're constantly told to optimize everything, to control every outcome, this ancient concept offers a really surprising shortcut to mental clarity.
How so?
Well, the moment you stop looking for an exit strategy, you suddenly find there's only one path forward. And there's a strange freedom in that.
Okay, let's unpack this with the core terminology then. When we break down the word Kakugo literally, what are we looking at?
It's often described as a state of clarity, of preparedness for a difficult challenge that you know is coming.
But it's not about ignoring the difficulty.
No, not at all. It's the opposite. It's about resolving to go into a task or a situation with zero illusions. You're fully acknowledging the likely emotional, physical, maybe even financial costs involved.
I'm thinking about an Olympic athlete right at the starting line.
That's a perfect image. They haven't just trained to win. They've trained to endure the searing pain in their lungs, the exhaustion in their muscles, and, just as importantly, the potential for crushing disappointment if they fall short.
So Kakugo is that final, quiet moment.
It is. It's that internal reckoning where they look at the entire challenge, the whole staircase, not just the top step, and they accept the pain as an inherent part of the commitment they've made.
It really is the opposite of all those motivational posters promising easy success, isn't it?
Completely. And I love that initial application you mentioned about imagining an underdog sports team shouting, "Let's Kakugo," before a big game.
Right. They're not vowing to guarantee a victory. which would just be naive against a heavy favorite.
No, it's a vow to embrace the sheer difficulty of the challenge, to do it fully, regardless of the odds or the pain that might come with failure. They're resolving to leave every last ounce of effort on the field.
And that idea, embracing the challenge without illusion, brings us right into this modern crisis of prioritization. Because for so many high-achieving people, the resolve they use is, it feels fundamentally misguided.
They apply that aggressive outward determination to internal battles, and the result is often just total burnout. The real question then becomes, what are you truly committed to, and what costs are you actually genuinely willing to accept?
This is where that really specific personal anecdote we found comes in. It details the incredible cost of that kind of misguided determination.
Yes. We're talking about an individual who found themselves working 16 hours a day.
7 days a week.
7 days a week. And this wasn't just, a temporary crunch for a big project. This was a sustained pace, even while dealing with profound personal turmoil, like the illness and eventual passing of a parent.
That just speaks to a corporate culture that doesn't just tolerate that kind of self-destruction, it actively rewards it.
And that intensity is what led to the inevitable collision with reality. When the subject finally went to see a doctor, it was initially for debilitating back pain. But the conversation shifted, and it shifted violently.
From pain management to life preservation.
Exactly. The doctor was deeply, deeply concerned about their physical state. There was significant weight gain, severely high blood pressure. We're talking numbers like 148 over 110.
Wow, that is seriously high.
Dangerously high. And the blood work officially put them in the type 2 diabetes category.
The body was literally just protesting the lifestyle at that point.
It was more than a protest. It was a full-blown crisis. The doctor's warning was brutally direct. The individual was a candidate for a stroke.
A stroke?
The physician actually threatened to write a doctor's orders letter directly to the boss to force them to cut back work, lose weight, and get the blood pressure and blood sugars under control. The fatal risk of chronic overworking, the ultimate consequence of this misplaced resolve, was suddenly concrete and immediate.
And here's where the philosophical realization, the pivot, really starts to crystallize. When this person reflected on all their previous attempts at self-improvement, the fad diets, the rushed gym sessions, they realized what the true motivation was.
And it wasn't what they thought.
Not at all. They were focused on making themselves more productive so they could sustain the very work pace that was destroying them.
That's the core realization they came to, yes. The exercise, the healthier eating, none of it was in the service of present happiness or some deeper, non-work-related personal value.
It was all about efficiency.
Purely about achieving a future improved state of efficiency, a way to fit more into the schedule. They finally understood that the desire for weight loss or better health just wasn't strong enough to permanently displace work as the highest, all-consuming priority in their inner hierarchy.
The desire wasn't integrated. It was just a temporary fix on the surface.
So that aggressive Western-style determination wasn't working because the priorities were still fundamentally misaligned with their true self-interest. To make a real change, they needed something deeper, a profound pivot.
They needed a goal they wanted badly enough to ethically and psychologically push work out of that top spot, something that went beyond their professional identity entirely.
And that's when the memory of the Shikoku pilgrimage resurfaced. This is an 800-mile journey, a circuit of 88 temples on the island of Shikoku in Japan.
And this person had started it before.
Decades earlier, they had walked only about a quarter of it nearly 40 years ago, back in 1983. It was truly unfinished business. And the gravity of that long-held, deeply personal desire proved to be the anchor they needed.
That deep, nearly 40-year-old desire provided the emotional and spiritual weight needed to finally challenge the tyranny of work. So the practical strategy became committing to 2 years of intensive walking training.
And this is where you can see the Kakugo pivot happening in real time. This wasn't just about physical prep. This decision shifted the entire goal. It moved from training for future happiness, lose weight to be healthy someday, into an action, walking in beautiful local green spaces that created present happiness.
So the training itself became the reward.
Exactly. It was a deliberate act of choosing life over labor right now, in the present moment, not just as a means to some future end. It broke that whole cycle of productive self-optimization.
And to reinforce this internal, private contract, this commitment, the individual set up a powerful ritual of resolve.
They did. They went and retrieved the items from that original 1983 trip and set up a small shrine in the corner of their study.
What kind of items are we talking about?
These are items that are incredibly symbolic in the context of the pilgrimage. First, there was the traditional walking staff, the kongazu. It's both a physical support and a representation of the traveling Buddha, Kukai. Then there was the conical sedge hat, the sujigasa, which pilgrims wear to ward off the sun and rain. And finally, the white pilgrim's coat, the hakui.
The white coat. What does that represent?
It represents purity, but it's also traditionally worn as a burial shroud. This symbolizes that the pilgrim is already prepared for death.
Wow. That's a powerful echo of the samurai ethos we're going to get into. The stakes are set internally from the very beginning.
Exactly. And placing this small shrine, the staff, the hat, the coat, right on the edge of their vision served as a constant, tangible reminder of the pilgrimage goal, not a work goal. A commitment to a deeply personal identity that had been sidelined for decades. It physically embodied their new internal contract.
The timing of this goal adds another profound layer, too. The plan was set for the individual's 60th birthday.
And in Asia, 60 is the Kanreki. It's a huge milestone. It marks the year the traditional calendar returns to its beginnings. The cycle of the 12 zodiac animals rotating through the 5 elements is complete. The calendar wheel has turned one full revolution.
So it symbolizes the completion of a circle, a return to unfinished business, often from your 20th year.
It does. And the pilgrimage itself, being a circular route without a true beginning or end, just reinforces that metaphor perfectly. It's a journey of continuous movement and return.
This creates a perfect framework for what a modern Kakugo can look like, doesn't it? It's this deep commitment to finish a circle left incomplete for 40 years, fully embracing the physical demands. 800 miles of walking and the completely unknown outcome.
Knowing there will be pain, exhaustion, and doubt, but deciding to proceed anyway. It's the quiet finality of the decision that matters.
And that's the moment of deep personal alignment, when they finally said, we decided to Kakugo. It's that internal stillness you achieve when the path is chosen and all the consequences are accepted.
That's what distinguishes it from mere motivation. Motivation is trying to feel good enough to start something. Kakugo is saying, I accept that this is going to hurt, but I'm going to walk anyway.
And that's why the pilgrimage was a more powerful commitment than all the previous self-improvement attempts.
Absolutely. Those efforts were all contingent on some future positive outcome. Lose weight, feel better, work harder. The pilgrimage, underpinned by Kakugo, is absolute. You walk the 800 miles even if you gain weight, even if the pain is constant, because the commitment is to the walking, not the result.
To truly understand the intensity and gravity of that modern decision, we absolutely have to trace Kakugo back to its historical and philosophical bedrock, and that means going into the stark, uncompromising world of the samurai.
Specifically, as it's captured in the 18th century text, Hagakure, the Book of the Samurai. This is where the concept is deeply intertwined with absolute loyalty and the total acceptance of mortality.
The Hagakure isn't a romantic text at all, is it?
Not in the slightest. It's a completely unromanticized practical guide to living a life dedicated to service. And the core of that service is sincerity, which is achieved through acceptance. The text defines the highest sort of retainer not by their skill in battle or their administrative genius,
But by their earnestness.
by their earnestness. One who sincerely places importance in his master, laying down body and mind without a moment's hesitation.
It creates such a strong contrast between appearance and inner reality. The text notes that when things are going well, when affairs are smooth, a lot of people rely on their wisdom, discrimination, and artfulness. They look useful and clever.
But the moment the Lord's fortunes decline, or when the cost of service becomes truly personal, those same clever people quickly turn their backs.
So true worth is only revealed at the breaking point, when the retainer is asked to throw away their life for their master.
That willingness to discard your own existence becomes the ultimate litmus test for sincerity. It removes all pretense, all self-interest.
This leads directly to that powerful paradox that's cited in the text. The fact that a useless person often becomes a matchless warrior in a moment of crisis. This is a point that, we really have to dig into this. Why would the useless one suddenly excel?
It's because the useless person has already given their life away. They accepted the ultimate consequence of their path long before the immediate danger ever arose. They've effectively removed the paralyzing grip of fear.
So while the useful or skilled warrior is worried about survival, about his legacy, about the strategic outcome,
The useless warrior is, in his own mind, already dead. He is liberated to act purely without any regard for consequence, which paradoxically makes his actions far more effective.
That is profound. It's a philosophical move that grants you radical freedom through total resignation. It shifts the entire value system from utility, what can I achieve, to absolute sincerity, how completely can I commit?
And this isn't a one-time decision. The concept requires a strict, constant spiritual devotion. The Hagakure mandates what it calls a mandate of sincerity, stating that every single morning, reverence must be done to the master first. It's a daily ritual of internal alignment.
So if you maintain this daily resolution, you'll always be mindful of the master, you'll never depart from him. This is the foundation of Kakugo, a sustained, ritualized focus on the commitment.
And this deep resolution then extends to a much broader existential view on life. This is what leads to the truly radical thought that the samurai must embrace. Death is the only sincerity.
Death is the only sincerity. What does that really mean?
When the text says the way, the true moral path, is found in the midst of a single breath where perversity cannot be held, it's arguing that any hesitation, any flicker of self-interest corrupts an action.
So only in the face of imminent death is a person truly, instantly sincere.
Because there's no time left for lies or excuses. This aligns with some ancient Stoic practices, like memento mori, remembering death, but in the samurai context, it's far more immediate and actionable.
It sounds intensely demanding. It's asking for a kind of instantaneous purity that feels almost impossible to maintain in daily life.
It is impossible, and the philosophy actually accommodates that difficulty by demanding endless, unceasing effort. The pursuit of study and the way is explicitly a lifelong process that never ever stops.
You must always think, this is not enough.
Exactly, and you have to actively resist settling into a comfortable, self-satisfied set of opinions. The way is about constant striving, constant self-assessment, and refusing to ever believe you have mastered anything.
And this constant striving applies directly to your professional life, too. It goes back to that concept of action over artistry.
Precisely. The text preaches the way of action, not dividing your path into two. Whatever your profession is, managing finances, administering an estate, or fighting on the battlefield, it should be done with complete, single-minded concentration. There's a specific warning against putting forth a lot of effort just to become an artist.
Wait, what's wrong with becoming an artist of the sword or the tea ceremony? Isn't mastery the goal?
The problem, according to the Hagakure, is becoming attached to the technique itself, the artistry, rather than to the deeper way of the samurai, which is sincerity and service.
Ah, I see. An artist becomes proud of his skill.
While a true samurai sees that skill as merely a tool for service, never an end in itself, mastery without that underlying sincerity is just cleverness. And that distinction is crucial to understanding Kakugo.
So the ultimate expression of this resolve, then, is the preparation for the ultimate consequence, what we're calling premeditating death. This is the most famous and maybe the most terrifying part of the Hagakure.
It is the ultimate psychological conditioning. The requirement is to meditate daily, without fail, on every horrible possible end you can imagine, being ripped apart by spears, swords, fire, earthquakes, or committing seppuku ritual suicide at the death of your master.
The purpose isn't to become morbid, though.
Not at all. It's to make death so familiar that it loses its paralyzing power.
So the mandate is to consider yourself as dead every single day. That famous saying from the elders is particularly chilling in this context. Step from under the eaves and you're a dead man. Leave the gate and the enemy is waiting.
And we have to be very careful not to mistake this for literal caution, like, be careful when you go outside.
It's not about that.
It's spiritual preemptive action. It's about accepting the inevitability of death beforehand. Once that ultimate consequence, the total loss of self, is accepted, all your daily actions lose their paralyzing weight. It allows you to act purely, decisively, and with perfect sincerity. This is the bedrock of Kakugo, that quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've already paid the ultimate price.
And this state of acceptance enables a philosophy of, surprisingly, joyful courage. This is exemplified by the samurai Shida Kichinosuke. He teaches that when you're facing calamity or difficult situations, you must dash forward bravely and with joy.
The phrase he uses is extraordinary. He says, the more the water, the higher the boat. It's an incredible piece of psychological advice.
It suggests that the bigger the problem, the greater the opportunity for glorious, decisive action.
It turns disaster into leverage. It urges you not to shrink from the difficulty, but to match the intensity of the challenge with even greater resolve.
He also provides a deeply moving description of the sequence of endurance, which maps perfectly onto a life lived with intense exertion and then eventual rest.
Think about running until you are completely breathless. Kichinnosuke notes that the good feeling of standing after that exhaustive run is surpassed by the superior feeling of just sitting down.
Better still is to lie down, and best of all is to sleep soundly. He's providing a metaphor for a well-lived life.
Exactly. The philosophy suggests a man's life should be exerted greatly when he is young, all that standing and running filled with toil and action, and only then does he earn the right to sleep soundly when he is old or near death.
To sleep first and then try to exert yourself, or to end your whole life in toil without that period of hard-won rest, is considered regrettable. The rest must be earned through sincere action.
And if you wanted to summarize the entire samurai concept of doing good of living correctly in a single word, the Hagakure provides it, it would be to endure suffering.
Not enduring suffering, not accepting the inevitable pain that comes with any real commitment, is defined as bad without exception.
And that provides the complete psychological framework for total, quiet acceptance of consequence, which is the very definition of Kakugo.
This philosophical bedrock, this idea of total internal commitment and the joyful acceptance of suffering is incredibly powerful. But that power makes it dangerously ripe for appropriation by the state, and that's where this narrative takes a very dark historical turn.
It really does. We see a transition from a personal, internal contract of sincerity, like the samurai's relationship with his master, to an external, imposed command for citizen sacrifice in the name of the empire.
This transition culminated historically during the Japanese Empire's expansion, and especially during World War II, right?
Yes. The state took this concept of Kakugo and transformed it. It went from being an ethical guide for a small warrior class to being a totalizing political demand on everyone. Ordinary Japanese people were pushed to sacrifice everything for the defense of the fatherland and the emperor.
The genius and the horror of the propaganda was that the state framed this demand not as coercion, but as a fateful, glorious choice,
which then placed the immense total weight of victory or defeat squarely on the shoulders of the common folk. It was essentially manufactured Kakugo for the masses.
And this sense of total self-sacrifice was relentlessly mobilized and really weaponized in the Japanese Empire's colonies, particularly in Taiwan, through what was called the Kuminka movement.
And this was far more than just political domination. It was a total cultural assimilation effort.
What were the explicit goals of the Kuminka movement?
The goal was nothing short of total identity eradication. They sought to eliminate Taiwanese and Chinese cultural identity, language, customs, everything, and mold the colonized population into perfectly devoted imperial subjects.
They were trying to manufacture a deep, sincere Kakugo toward the emperor.
Exactly. Mirroring the samurai's devotion to his lord, but imposed on millions of people who had no such traditional allegiance.
And the most disturbing aspect of this mobilization was the pedagogy of death that started in the earliest stages of schooling. This really shows how deep the state had to reach to enforce this concept of total sacrifice.
Wartime education was horrifyingly blunt. Children were instructed from a very early age that they may die at any time for the imperial nation.
So this obsession with death, which was once the noble, self-chosen path of the samurai, became a disturbing, ever-present part of daily life for every citizen,
including colonized children who were essentially being trained for forced self-annihilation.
The symbolism the state employed during crises really showed their priorities. When air raids became frequent, teachers received instructions that made the state's value structure terrifyingly clear.
They were instructed to protect the emperor's portrait and any imperial edicts before they protected the children under their charge.
The symbolic representation of imperial power was literally prioritized over the lives of the colonized population, and the teachers were tasked with enforcing this hierarchy.
It was a test of loyalty, a test of this manufactured Kakugo. If you had truly accepted the contract to sacrifice everything, you would protect the symbol above life itself.
And to make this abstract, high-level patriotism feel emotionally resonant and applicable to everyday life, the state constructed these detailed governance myths.
Right. They were built around real people and then circulated relentlessly through newspapers and textbooks. They were designed to appeal directly to that emotional desire for self-effacement and total commitment.
These myths were critical for social control, weren't they? They provided clear, relatable examples of what pure imperial Kakugo was supposed to look like.
Absolutely. One of the key examples is the story of the national anthem boy. This was a Taiwanese boy named Chan who supposedly died in an earthquake.
And the story that was circulated claimed that as teachers rushed to see him on his deathbed, he used his very last breath to sing the Japanese national anthem.
Yes, the story may have had some basis in reality. Maybe his family corroborated parts of it, but the state amplified it immediately. It was circulated as this beautiful, self-effacing act of patriotism, a perfect, pure performance of a young Taiwanese imperial subject embracing his designated role, even in the face of death. This provided a model for every child in the colony.
And then there's the darker, more manipulated example of the Belle of Sion, the story of an Aboriginal girl.
Sion was a real person. She was an Aboriginal girl who was helping her teacher, who'd been drafted into the war, carry luggage down a mountain during a storm. Tragically, she fell into a river and died.
So initially, it was a non-combatant tragedy.
Correct. But in the subsequent fictionalized rewrites and propaganda, the emotional and patriotic stakes were radically raised to serve the state's narrative.
How has the story changed to reflect this coerced Kakugo?
In the fictionalized version, she heroically clings to the teacher's Japanese sword until her death. This symbolizes the absolute link between fighting, Japaneseness, and sacrifice. She wasn't just helping a teacher anymore, she was protecting a military symbol.
They completely retooled the story.
They did. The rewrites even included fictional dialogue where she tells her fiancé, who is worried about leaving her, "You are a man and you should have the bravery of the warriors and go to the front to fight. If you have the enthusiasm to follow the warriors to the front, then you can be my lover and my fiancé."
So they turned a tragic accident into a high-stakes emotional recruitment tool. They made sure that even non-combatants, even women, understood that their role was to motivate total sacrifice in others.
And the frightening effectiveness of this manufactured emotional commitment is really demonstrated by the sheer volume of response when the military program opened volunteer slots for Taiwanese personnel.
What kind of numbers are we talking about?
In 1942, over 400,000 Taiwanese applied for only about 1,000 positions.
400,000, that's staggering.
It is. The demand for total commitment had been internalized by a massive portion of the population, driven by this combination of fear, ambition, and this manufactured resolve.
The internal language given to soldiers emphasized a specific psychological alignment that directly mirrors the samurai's single-minded sincerity, but of course, with a state-mandated goal.
The wartime instructions were crystal clear. Soldiers must extinguish one's selfhood or meshi. They had to maintain rigid military discipline, cultivate an unwavering attack spirit, and hold an absolute belief in certain victory.
This is the state-mandated version of the samurai's internal contract, demanding the self be completely annihilated for the benefit of the greater imperial identity.
But this was often a coerced performance of Kakugo, wasn't it? That veneer of voluntary sacrifice was very, very thin.
Yeah, absolutely. Even when individuals volunteered, they felt immense social and political pressure. If a Japanese official or an employer asked if you were willing to be a soldier or a military worker, you had to respond with enthusiastic eagerness.
You had to say, yes, I really want to go. I'm happy that I can go.
Or else you'd risk severe social or professional trouble. The supposed benevolence of the emperor's recruitment was just a thin veil masking an apparatus of coercive power that demanded this emotional performance of total commitment.
And we can see the deep psychological impact this had on the Taiwanese elite through the diaries and personal accounts that survived the war. We have two powerful contrasting examples, the Dr. Wu Zhenrong and the intellectual Lin Shinanteng.
Let's start with the doctor, Wu Zhenrong.
He was born and educated entirely under Japanese rule. He internalized the Japanese identity so deeply that he wrote in his diary that he was completely educated in Japanese and that no one can deny that we are Japanese.
He had achieved the desired emotional alignment. He accepted the imperial contract of Kakugo.
His emotional identification was total. He wrote about crying over German propaganda films and feeling exhilaration as white-held Asian cities fell to the Japanese in 1942, celebrating the fulfillment of the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. He saw the world entirely through the lens of Japanese power and racial discourse.
And even as Japan's military fortunes declined drastically, Wu felt compelled to stand with Japan.
He worried more about a spiritual lack among the people, a lack of Kakugo, than he did about material hardships or the impending defeat. This just demonstrates the terrifying success of that emotional mobilization. The internalized contract was so strong that it survived the logic of defeat, leading him to deep spiritual despair when the war was lost.
Now, you contrast this with the diary of Lin Shantang, who was an older intellectual.
Right. He maintained his distinct Chinese identity and used his diary to voice sharp observations about the coercive structure around him.
He was much more shrewd.
Very shrewd. He often observed that Japanese intentions toward Taiwan were frequently disingenuous, and he recognized the political game being played. He saw the state's rhetoric about the supposed purity of spirit and impartiality as empty words designed purely to motivate mass sacrifice.
But he also used the colonizers' own rhetoric against them, didn't he?
He did, very cleverly. He would shrewdly agree with the professed goal of impartiality, only to then argue that if the Japanese truly believed in it, then Taiwanese people should be given equal footing and opportunities for self-rule and political elevation.
So while Wu completely internalized the Japanese identity and its power discourse, Lin saw the political manipulation inherent in the demand for Kakugo.
And that contrast highlights the complexity of the situation. For some, it was a terrifying, sincere emotional alignment. For others, it was a dangerous, semi-coerced performance that was required just to survive or negotiate the apparatus of power.
So in that wartime context, Kakugo meant standing ready for death, whether that readiness was born of sincere, terrifying alignment or required through intense social pressure. The state took the quiet internal contract and turned it into a loud external demand. So if we follow the trajectory of this idea, Kakugo, we've seen it move from a samurai's total readiness for death, that ultimate sincerity expressed in the Hagakure, to a state's cynical demand for citizen sacrifice during wartime, a mass-produced, weaponized resolve.
And finally, we see its echo right back in the modern context. A person facing burnout and a health crisis, realizing that the solution isn't more aggressive, outward determination, or fighting for a promotion,
but an internal, bone-deep acceptance of consequences in pursuit of a deeply personal, life-affirming goal, like the Shikoku pilgrimage.
It is the acceptance of failure that allows for true commitment.
The distinction remains crucial, doesn't it? Whether you're wearing the armor of a samurai, the uniform of a wartime conscript, or the sneakers of a modern pilgrim, Kakugo is the stillness that comes from the refusal to run. It's the quiet certainty of the private contract you make with yourself.
It is not the courage to win. It is the courage to accept the path, regardless of the destination.
The power of this philosophy really lies not in winning the external fight, but in finding that inner sincerity.
It's the quiet, constant understanding that you have fully committed to the path, irrespective of the difficulties or the inevitable pain that the commitment entails. It's a profound realization that once you stop looking for the exit, you are entirely free on the road you are walking.